At our wedding, my wife raised her glass and said, "This dance is for the man I've secretly loved for 10 years." When I stood up to accept the dance, my wife said, "Not you, you can dance with the guests." Then she walked past me and stopped in front of my brother. The room applauded, until I asked my father one question. Then my wife went pale, and my brother collapsed. The champagne flutes caught the light like 1,000 tiny prisms suspended in air, each one holding bubbles that rose and burst in silent celebration. I watched them, mesmerized, because it was easier than watching the faces around me, easier than acknowledging the weight of the moment, the finality of what was happening. My wedding day, the day I'd imagined since I was a boy, watching my parents dance in our living room to old vinyl records, their bodies moving in perfect synchrony, their eyes locked in that particular gaze that said, "You are my world." Now here I was, 32 years old, standing in the Plaza Terrace Ballroom with its vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers, surrounded by 300 people who had come to witness the union of Marcus Chen and Olivia Hartwell. The room smelled of lilies and expensive perfume, of catered salmon and wedding cake, of anticipation and champagne, and the particular electricity that comes from gathering this many people in formal wear, with open bars and high expectations. Olivia stood beside me in her dress. God, that dress. It had cost more than my first car, a cascade of ivory silk and French lace that made her look like something out of a Renaissance painting. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate arrangement that had taken 3 hours and 2 stylists to achieve. Diamond earrings, my wedding gift to her, caught the light every time she moved her head. She was beautiful. She had always been beautiful. That had never been the question. The question, if I'm being honest, had always been something else entirely. Something I'd pushed down, ignored, rationalized away with the desperate logic of a man who'd invested too much to turn back. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ's voice boomed across the sound system, smooth and professional, the voice of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "The bride would like to say a few words." A microphone appeared in Olivia's hand. I don't remember who gave it to her. My memory of that moment is strange, hyper-real in some details, completely absent in others. I remember the exact shade of her lipstick, a color called Crimson Confession, that I'd seen on the bathroom counter during our getting ready period. I remember the way the silk of her dress whispered when she moved. But I don't remember the transition, the moment between standing beside her as her husband and watching her step forward into the space between our table and the dance floor. "Thank you all so much for being here," Olivia said, her voice amplified and confident. She'd always been good at public speaking. It was one of the things that had attracted me to her in the first place. That easy confidence, the way she could command a room without seeming to try though. "This day means everything to me. Everything." Applause rippled through the crowd. I smiled because that's what you do. You smile at your wedding. You smile when your bride is speaking. You smile even when there's a cold stone forming in your stomach, a sensation you can't quite name, but that feels suspiciously like dread. "I want to talk about love," Olivia continued, and now she was pacing slightly, the way she did when she was building to something, when she had a point to make and wanted everyone to understand its importance. "Real love, the kind that weathers storms and survives doubts. The kind that makes you wake up every morning knowing exactly who you're meant to be with." More applause. My mother was crying already. She'd been crying on and off all day, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief embroidered with little roses. My father stood beside her, tall and stern in his tuxedo, his face arranged in an expression of solemn approval. And next to him, standing with his own champagne flute raised, was my brother. Daniel Chen was 2 years younger than me, but had always seemed older somehow, more assured, more comfortable in his own skin. Where I was careful and methodical, he was spontaneous and charismatic. Where I agonized over decisions, he trusted his instincts. People gravitated to Daniel. They always had. At family gatherings, he was the one telling stories that made everyone laugh. At company events, we both worked at our father's real estate development firm. He was the one clients requested by name. He caught my eye now and raised his glass slightly higher, a small smile playing at his lips. I raised mine back. Brothers, best men, partners in the family business and in life, or so I'd always believed. This dance, Olivia said, and now her voice had changed, dropped into a lower register that was somehow both intimate and theatrical. This dance is for the man I've secretly loved for 10 years. The room erupted in appreciative murmurs. 10 years. We'd been together for 3, engaged for 1. So she was talking about loving me from afar, I thought, before we'd officially gotten together. A romantic notion, the kind of thing people love to hear at weddings. I stepped forward. Of course I stepped forward. I was her husband. We'd been practicing our first dance for weeks, a carefully choreographed waltz to Can't Help Falling in Love, the Elvis version, not the modern covers. Traditional, elegant, everything a first dance should be. But Olivia's hand came up, palm out, stopping me in my tracks. Not you, she said, and the microphone caught every syllable. Broadcast them to every corner of the room. You can dance with the guests. The words didn't make sense at first. I stood there, frozen, my brain trying to process what I'd heard against what logic dictated should be happening. This was our wedding, our first dance. There must be some misunderstanding, some joke I wasn't getting. Then Olivia walked past me. She walked past me, and the train of her dress brushed against my legs, and the scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the same perfume she'd worn since college, wafted by, and I turned to watch her cross the space between us and my family's table. She stopped in front of Daniel. My brother set down his champagne flute. His face was flushed. From alcohol or emotion, I couldn't tell. Olivia extended her hand to him, and after a moment's hesitation that seemed to stretch into eternity, he took it. The opening notes of Can't Help Falling in Love began to play. They walked to the center of the dance floor together, her hand in his, and when they turned to face each other, when his hand settled on her waist and hers on his shoulder, the room exploded in applause. 300 people clapping, 300 people celebrating. 300 people who thought they were witnessing something beautiful and romantic and wonderfully unexpected. A bride honoring a special relationship, perhaps her new brother-in-law, perhaps acknowledging Daniel's role as best man in some creative way. But I knew, in that instant, watching them move together to the music we'd chosen for our first dance, I knew. The way she looked at him, the way he looked at her, the perfect synchronization of their movements, as if they'd practiced this together, as if they knew each other's bodies in a way that came from more than casual acquaintance. The way she fit against him, the way he held her, the way they moved as one. I stood there at the edge of the dance floor, alone in a room full of people, my hands hanging uselessly at my sides, my expensive tuxedo suddenly feeling like a costume, like something I'd put on to play a part in someone else's story. My mother was still crying, but now I wondered if those were entirely tears of joy. My father's expression had shifted from approval to something harder to read. Concern maybe, or calculation. He was always calculating, always 3 steps ahead in the chess game of life and business. The song swelled. Olivia and Daniel turned in slow circles, her dress creating spirals of silk around them. The photographer was capturing it all, his camera clicking away, documenting what would look in pictures like a beautiful, unconventional wedding moment. What would look, to anyone who hadn't felt the seismic shift in the room's emotional geography, like joy. And maybe for some people it was joy. Maybe for my college roommate Dave, standing near the bar with his wife, this was just an interesting twist in wedding entertainment. Maybe for Olivia's bridesmaids, women I'd met a handful of times, friends from her consulting firm, this was girl power boldness, a modern bride making modern choices. But for me, it was revelation. It was the moment when 1,000 small inconsistencies suddenly arranged themselves into a coherent pattern. Late nights when she'd said she was working but had been unreachable. Text messages she'd angled away from my view. The way she'd insisted Daniel be my best man, even though I'd originally wanted Dave for the role. The way she and Daniel always seemed to have inside jokes I wasn't part of. Moments where their eyes would meet across a room and they'd smile about something unspoken. The way she'd been distant for the past 6 months, even as we planned our wedding. Especially as we planned our wedding. Going through the motions with the kind of mechanical precision that I'd attributed to stress, but which now seemed like something else entirely. The way she'd recoiled the last time I tried to initiate sex, claiming exhaustion, the way she'd started going to the gym at odd hours, the way she'd changed her phone's passcode, and when I'd asked about it casually, had said something about privacy being important in a relationship. All of it, every piece, clicking into place with the inevitability of a locked tumbler finding its home position. The song was ending. Daniel dipped Olivia, a move we'd practiced for our dance, a move I'd done with her in our living room 24 times. And she threw her head back and laughed, genuine and uninhibited and more alive than I'd seen her in months. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time, people standing, someone whistling. A triumph. A moment everyone would remember. I found myself walking toward my father's table. I don't remember deciding to do it. My legs just carried me there, through the applauding crowd, past the tables with their white linens and centerpieces of roses and baby's breath, past the faces of relatives and friends and business associates who were all still smiling, still clapping, still caught up in whatever narrative they'd constructed to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. My father watched me approach. His expression was carefully neutral now, the face he wore in business negotiations, when he was deciding whether to sign a contract or walk away from a deal. "Dad," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and calm, as if it belonged to someone else. "I have a question." He nodded slightly. Behind me, the applause was dying down. The DJ was saying something, probably announcing the next dance or the cake cutting or whatever came next in the carefully scheduled progression of wedding festivities. I leaned close to my father, close enough that only he could hear me, close enough to smell his cologne, the same Creed Aventus he'd worn for as long as I could remember, the scent of power and old money and unquestioned authority. "The Harris Peninsula Development Project," I said quietly, "the one you put Daniel in charge of 6 months ago. The $50 million investment. Did it ever exist?" The question had come from nowhere and everywhere, a synthesis of pattern recognition and desperate intuition. 6 months ago, my father had announced Daniel would be leading a major new development project. Confidential, he'd said. High-level investors who valued privacy. Daniel had been traveling for it, or so he'd claimed. Meeting with architects, surveyors, financial backers. He'd been busy, unavailable, caught up in what our father had described as the biggest opportunity the Chen family business had seen in a decade. Except now, with the clarity that comes from having your reality completely inverted, I realized I'd never seen any paperwork, never been included in any meetings, never been consulted on any decisions, despite technically being Daniel's senior in the company, despite my role as director of acquisitions, meaning I should have at least been aware of a project that size. My father's face didn't change, but something happened behind his eyes. A calculation, a decision point. "Marcus," he said slowly. "Did it exist?" I repeated louder now. The room had gone quiet, the DJ had stopped talking, the music had stopped. 300 people were suddenly very interested in a conversation between a groom and his father. My father glanced past me at Daniel and Olivia, who had separated and were standing near the dance floor. When I turned to look, I saw that the color had drained from Olivia's face. Her crimson lips stood out in stark contrast to skin that had gone pale as wedding linen. Daniel was staring at my father with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear and pleading and desperate calculation all mixed together. "Son," my father said, and his voice carried across the now silent ballroom, amplified by the kind of acoustics that made 300 people holding their breath sound like a void. "We should discuss this in private." "No," I said. The word came out stronger than I expected. "We should discuss it right here, right now, in front of everyone." My father's jaw tightened. 25 years of working with him, learning from him, trying to be the son he wanted me to be, and I'd never directly defied him like this. The Chen family had rules. Hierarchy, chain of command. You didn't air disagreements publicly. You certainly didn't question the patriarch at a family event. But then, the patriarch had never helped orchestrate the destruction of your wedding day before. "The Harris Peninsula Project," I said, turning now to address the room, my voice carrying in the silence. "My brother has supposedly been working on it for 6 months, traveling for it, building relationships for it. Tell me, Dad, where is Harris Peninsula?" Silence. How many acres? Silence. Who are the investors? My father remained stone-faced, but I saw my mother put her hand to her mouth. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd always known everything that happened in our family, had perfected the art of knowing without speaking, of understanding without acknowledging. There is no Harris Peninsula project, I said, and the words hung in the air like smoke. Is there? Daniel moved then, taking a step toward me, his hand outstretched in a gesture that might have been supplication or might have been the beginning of an explanation. But I held up my hand, mirroring the gesture Olivia had made to stop me, and he froze. And you paid him, I said, looking at my father. You paid Daniel what? A salary? Expenses? Travel allowances? All for a project that didn't exist. All so he'd have an excuse to be away from the office. All so he'd have a reason to travel. All so nobody would question why he was so busy, so unavailable, so caught up in something important. I turned to Olivia now, and she was shaking her head. Small movements like she was trying to dislodge the reality that was crystallizing around us. You said this dance was for the man you'd secretly loved for 10 years, I said. We've been together for 3 years, which means you loved him before we met. While we were dating, while we were planning this, I gestured around the room at the flowers and the lights and the carefully arranged tables and the wedding cake that cost more than some people's cars, and the photographer who was now capturing this dissolution with the same diligence he'd captured our vows an hour earlier. You loved him through all of it, I continued, and he loved you. And our father, helped you hide it, created a fake project, gave Daniel cover, enabled this. Marcus, this was Daniel finally speaking, his voice cracking. Let me explain. Explain what? I was surprised by how steady my voice was, how calm I sounded when inside I was fragmenting into 1,000 pieces. Explain how you fucked my fiancée. Explain how you fucked her while I was planning our wedding. Explain how you stood up there as my best man, handed me the rings, gave a toast about brotherhood and loyalty, all while you were sleeping with my wife. The last word came out as a shout. My wife, the woman who was legally, as of an hour ago, bound to me. The woman who had stood before these same 300 people and promised to forsake all others, to be faithful, to honor and cherish. The woman who was crying now, mascara running down her face. Her beautiful, carefully made-up face that had taken hours to perfect, and that was now a portrait of guilt and regret and something else, something that looked suspiciously like relief. I'm sorry, she whispered. But the room's acoustics picked it up and carried it, her apology broadcast to everyone. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I never meant... Never meant what? I demanded. Never meant to fall in love with my brother? Never meant to sleep with him? Never meant to marry me while you were in love with someone else? Which part didn't you mean, Olivia? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you meant all of it. Every calculated, deliberate, cruel moment of it. My brother collapsed then, not metaphorically, literally collapsed, his knees buckling, his body folding onto itself as he sank to the floor beside the dance floor where he'd just held my wife in his arms. His face was in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I love her, he said, the words muffled but audible. I love her, Marcus. I've loved her since the day you brought her home, since that first dinner. I've loved her, and I tried not to. I swear I tried, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop. The confession should have hurt more, should have felt like a knife, like being shot, like all the dramatic metaphors people use for emotional devastation. But instead, it just felt like confirmation, like the final piece of the pattern clicking into place. When? I asked, and my voice was quiet again now, almost conversational. When did it start? Olivia and Daniel looked at each other, a glance that held entire conversations. God, how many of those glances had I missed? How many silent communications had happened right in front of me while I'd been oblivious, trusting, naive? 2 years ago, Olivia said finally. It started 2 years ago. 2 years, 2 years of deception, 2 years of her kissing me goodnight and then texting him. 2 years of family dinners where they'd sat across from each other and played their parts. 2 years of holidays and birthdays and business meetings where they'd maintained the fiction. 2 years during which I'd proposed, during which she'd said yes, during which we'd looked at venues and tasted cakes and debated invitation fonts and argued about the guest list and done all the things couples do when they're planning their lives together. 2 years during which she'd been building a different life entirely. The question I asked Dad, I said, looking at my father again, when did you find out? He didn't answer immediately, and in that hesitation, I knew. You knew before I proposed, I said, didn't you? My mother made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. My father's face hardened. Marcus, he said, this isn't the time or place. You knew. The shout came from somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't recognize. You knew Daniel and Olivia were together, and you let me propose anyway. You let me plan a wedding. You walked her down the aisle. You walked her down the fucking aisle to marry me while you knew she was in love with your other son. The pieces were still falling into place, still rearranging themselves into new and horrible patterns. Why, I demanded. Why would you do that? Why would you let this happen? My father stood slowly, and when he spoke, his voice had the cold precision of a closing argument. Because, Marcus, you need to understand something about this family, about this business, about life. Not everything is about love. Some things are about legacy, about stability, about making the right alliances and maintaining the right appearances. He paused, looking around the room at the 300 witnesses to this disintegration. Olivia is the daughter of Robert Hartwell. Robert Hartwell, who sits on the board of Hartwell Industries, which owns 35% of the commercial real estate in this city. Hartwell, whose partnership could make or break our expansion into the metropolitan market. This marriage, your marriage, was supposed to be the beginning of that partnership. I stared at him, understanding and not understanding, comprehension and incomprehension existing simultaneously. You're saying you let me marry her for a business deal? I'm saying marriage is always a business deal, whether people want to admit it or not. And this particular marriage came with advantages that benefited all of us, including you. Including me? I almost laughed. How exactly does marrying a woman who's in love with my brother benefit me? You get a beautiful, accomplished wife from a good family. You get business connections that will serve you for life. You get the social status that comes with being Olivia Hartwell's husband. What you do with your heart is your business. What you do with your assets is family business. The cynicism was breathtaking. The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that this was how the world worked. How it had always worked. How it should work. And what about Daniel? I asked. What does he get in this arrangement? My father's expression softened slightly when he looked at my brother, still on the floor, still crying. Daniel was going to be compensated, he said quietly. Generously, he was going to get the Harris Peninsula project. A real one, not the fiction I created. He was going to get his chance to prove himself, to build something of his own. And in time, once you and Olivia had been married long enough to satisfy the social conventions, once the Hartwell partnership was secure, we would have found a way for them to be together. A way for them to be together, I repeated. You mean divorce. You mean after you'd used me to secure your business deal, after I'd served my purpose. Then I'd get quietly divorced, and you'd move Olivia from one brother to another like she was a chess piece, Rupert. It would have been handled discreetly, my father said, as if that made it better. Everyone would have maintained dignity. You would have been taken care of financially. It was a solution that worked for everyone. Everyone except me. You were going to be fine, Marcus. You're always fine. You're steady, reliable. You don't rock boats or make scenes or demand more than your share. You would have accepted it eventually and moved on. The assessment stung because it was partially true. I was those things, had always been those things, the good son, the responsible one, the one who did what was expected and didn't ask too many questions and colored inside the lines. But standing there in my wedding tuxedo, in front of 300 people who had just watched my world implode, something changed. I want her signature, I said. What? Olivia looked up, confused. On the prenuptial agreement, I said, the one your father's lawyers drew up. The one that says if either party commits adultery within the first year of marriage, they forfeit all claims to marital assets and pay damages of $1 million to the offended party. I'd forgotten about that clause until this moment, had barely paid attention to it during the negotiations, honestly, because I'd never imagined it would be relevant. But I remembered now with perfect clarity that specific paragraph. I remembered because Olivia's father had insisted on it, had wanted protection for his daughter, and in the spirit of fairness, the clause had been made bilateral. Olivia's face went from pale to gray. Marcus, you can't what? Enforce the contract you signed? The legally binding document that you agreed to 3 months ago? I turned to my father. And you. You said this marriage came with benefits for all of us. Let me tell you about the benefits I'm walking away with. I get proof of adultery. Thank you for providing that in front of 300 witnesses. I get the $1 million damages. I get to keep my inheritance intact, since the adultery clause protects my separate property, and I get to never see either of you again. Son, my father started. Don't call me that, I said. You've made it very clear today that I'm not your son. I'm a tool, an asset to be deployed, a means to an end. Well, congratulations, Dad. You deployed me. And now I'm done being deployed. I looked around the room one more time. 300 faces staring back at me. Some shocked, some sympathetic, some clearly uncomfortable, wanting to be anywhere but here. My college roommate Dave looked stricken. My cousin Jennifer was crying. Olivia's bridesmaids were huddled together like witnesses to a crime. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice carrying across the silence. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. Please enjoy the food in the open bar. It's all been paid for. Might as well not let it go to waste. Then I walked out. I walked out of my wedding reception, through the ballroom doors, past the hotel lobby with its marble floors, and its front desk staffed by people who carefully didn't look at me, through the revolving door and into the night. It was snowing. The first snow of the season, fat flakes falling through the yellow glow of streetlights, dusting the city in white. I stood on the sidewalk in my tuxedo, without a coat, and watched the snow fall and thought about nothing and everything. Behind me, the Plaza Terrace rose into the sky, its windows glowing with warm light. My wedding was in there. My wife, my brother, my father, my entire family and social circle. My life, or what had been my life up until an hour ago. I pulled out my phone, the expensive iPhone I'd gotten for my birthday, a gift from Olivia, which now seemed like its own kind of joke, and called an Uber. While I waited, I watched the snow and thought about the man I'd been when I'd walked into that ballroom this morning, full of hope and nerves and excited anticipation. That man was gone. He'd died somewhere between the champagne toast and the revelation. He died and left behind someone else, someone harder and colder and less inclined to trust. But also perhaps someone more honest. The Uber arrived, a Toyota Camry driven by a man named Hassan, who took one look at me and wisely decided not to ask any questions. I gave him my address and settled into the back seat, watching the Plaza Terrace recede through the rear window until it was just another set of lights in the snowy distance. My phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call. I turned it off without looking at any of them and watched the city slide past, familiar and strange. Every street corner a reminder of a life I'd thought I was living, but which had been, apparently, just another fiction. When Hassan dropped me off at my building, the luxury apartment I'd signed a lease for 3 months ago, the place Olivia and I were supposed to return to tonight as husband and wife, I tipped him $100 and took the elevator up to the 15th floor. The apartment was exactly as we'd left it that morning. Olivia's makeup scattered across the bathroom counter. My running shoes by the door. The coffee maker I'd forgotten to turn off, now cooking the remaining liquid into acidic sludge. Evidence of the couple we'd been. The life we'd supposedly shared. I walked through the rooms like a stranger, seeing everything with new eyes. The pictures on the walls, us at the beach, us at Daniel's birthday party, us at a company gala. In every photo, I was smiling. Genuine, open, happy smiles. In every photo, Olivia was looking at the camera. Never at me, always at the camera. I'd never noticed that before. I sat down on the couch, still in my tuxedo, and stared at the dark television screen until my reflection stared back at me. A groom without a wedding, a husband without a wife, a brother without a brother, a son without a family. Just Marcus Chen, lone in an apartment full of lies, watching snow fall past the windows and wondering who the hell I was supposed to be now. I woke up on the couch, still in my tuxedo, to harsh sunlight and a headache that felt like my skull was being compressed in a vice. For a blessed moment, I didn't remember. Then I moved, felt the stiff fabric of my rented formal wear, and it all came crashing back. The dance, the revelation, the collapse. My phone sat on the coffee table where I'd left it, powered off. A small black rectangle of avoidance. I stared at it for a long time before finally turning it on. The notifications came in waves. 53 text messages, 27 missed calls, 15 voicemails, multiple emails, several DMs on Instagram and LinkedIn, which seemed particularly perverse. Who reaches out via professional networking after witnessing your wedding disaster? I didn't read any of them immediately. Instead, I made coffee, standing in my kitchen in wrinkled formal wear, while the machine hissed and gurgled and produced something that vaguely resembled consciousness in liquid form. Only then did I start going through messages. Dave, 11:47 p.m. Dude, call me. I don't even know what to say, but call me. Dave, 12:15 a.m. Seriously, man, where did you go? Are you okay? Dave, 1:33 a.m. I'm assuming you don't want to talk, but I'm here whenever you're ready. This is fucked up. I'm so sorry. Mom, 11:52 p.m. Marcus, please come home. We need to talk about this as a family. Mom, 12:04 a.m. Your father is very upset. Please respond so we know you're safe. Mom, 1:15 a.m. I know you're hurting, but running away doesn't solve anything. Please call me. I deleted those without responding. Olivia, 11:43 p.m. Marcus, where did you go? Olivia, 11:45 p.m. Please let me explain, Olivia, 11:50 p.m. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but please just talk to me, Olivia, 12:22 a.m. I'm coming to the apartment. Olivia, 12:45 a.m. Why did you change the locks? That last one gave me a grim satisfaction. I hadn't changed the locks, not personally, but I'd called a 24-hour locksmith from the Uber, paid triple the normal rate for immediate service, and had him meet me at the building. By 11:30 p.m., Olivia's keys no longer worked. The locksmith had been a guy named Rick who'd seen enough late-night domestic situations to know not to ask questions. He'd changed the locks, provided me with new keys, and left with a generous tip and the wisdom to forget he'd ever been there. Olivia, 1:07 a.m. This is childish. We're married. You can't just lock me out. Olivia, 1:34 a.m. My lawyer says this is illegal. Olivia, 2:15 a.m. Fine. I'm staying at a hotel, but we need to talk tomorrow. There were more, but I stopped reading. Instead, I opened a new message to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Marcus, Rebecca, this is Marcus Chen. I know it's been a long time and this is out of the blue, but I need a lawyer. Are you still practicing family law? Rebecca Huang had been in my study group at Columbia. She'd gone on to specialize in divorce and family law, building a reputation as one of the most ruthless litigators in the city. We'd stayed in touch sporadically, the way college friends do, birthday wishes on Facebook, the occasional comment on a career update. Now I needed her particular brand of ruthlessness. My phone rang almost immediately. Rebecca, calling from what was probably her personal cell at 9 a.m. on a Sunday. Marcus, she said without preamble, I saw the wedding yesterday. Everyone saw the wedding. It's all over social media. Are you okay? No, I said honestly, but I will be. Can you help me? I can help you destroy her in court, Rebecca said. When do you want to meet? Today, now, as soon as possible. My office in an hour? She hung up. I drank my coffee, showered, put on jeans and a sweater, clothes that felt radically casual after 12 hours in formal wear, and caught another Uber to Rebecca's office building in Midtown. The law firm of Huang and Associates occupied the 23rd floor of a glass and steel tower. Even on a Sunday, the reception area hummed with quiet activity. Associates working weekends, support staff maintaining the machinery of litigation. Rebecca met me in her office, a corner space with windows overlooking the city and walls lined with law books that probably mostly served as impressive decoration in the age of digital research. She looked exactly as I remembered, sharp, professional, with an air of contained intensity that suggested she was always thinking 3 moves ahead. "Show me the prenup," she said, gesturing to a chair. I pulled up the PDF on my phone. Thank God I'd been paranoid enough to keep digital copies of everything, and handed it over. Rebecca read in silence, her expression neutral, but her eyes moving rapidly across the screen. "The adultery clause is airtight," she said finally, "and you have witnesses, 300 of them. Is that enough? The dance itself doesn't prove they slept together." Rebecca smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who just spotted wounded prey. "Marcus, your wife announced her love for your brother at your wedding, then danced with him to your first dance song, in front of 300 people, and when confronted, neither of them denied the affair. In fact, your brother explicitly admitted to loving her. That's not just proof, that's a gift-wrapped confession with a bow on top." She set down my phone and leaned back in her chair. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file for annulment first, on grounds of fraud. She married you under false pretenses while engaged in an ongoing affair with your brother. That's textbook fraud. If the annulment doesn't go through, and it might not, judges can be unpredictable, we'll proceed with divorce on grounds of adultery. Either way, the prenup's adultery clause triggers. She owes you $1 million. Can she pay that? I'll find out. I'll need you to sign some documents authorizing me to investigate her finances. But from what I know of the Hartwell family, she can pay. The question is whether she will or whether she'll try to fight it." "She'll fight," I said with certainty. "Her father will make her fight. The Hartwells don't lose gracefully." "Good," Rebecca said. "I prefer it when they fight. Makes the victory sweeter." She pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. "I need you to write down everything you remember from last night. Every word, every gesture, every admission. I need a timeline of your relationship with Olivia, including any suspicious behavior, any times she was unreachable, any evidence of the affair you might have missed in the moment. I need your brother's role in your life, business relationships, family dynamics, anything that shows premeditation." Premeditation. "The affair has been going on for 2 years. They maintained it through your engagement and wedding planning. Your father knew and actively facilitated it with a fake business project. That's not a crime of passion, Marcus. That's conspiracy. And conspiracy shows consciousness of guilt, which strengthens our case." I spent the next 3 hours writing. Rebecca left me alone in her office with coffee and legal pads, and I documented everything. The timeline, the inconsistencies I'd ignored, the text messages Olivia had hidden, the way Daniel had always volunteered to run errands with her to help her with wedding planning, to be involved in ways that had seemed supportive at the time, but which now revealed themselves as opportunities. I wrote about the Harris Peninsula Project, about my father's calculated deception, about the moment I'd realized that my entire family had participated in a conspiracy designed to use me as a pawn in a business arrangement. When I finished, my hand was cramping, and I'd filled 15 pages with single-spaced writing. Rebecca read through it methodically, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. "This is better than I hoped," she said finally. "Your father's involvement is particularly damning. It shows a pattern of fraud extending beyond just the affair. It shows the marriage itself was a sham from the beginning. What do I do now?" "Now you go home. You don't contact Olivia, Daniel, or your parents. You don't respond to their messages. You don't engage. Every interaction is an opportunity for them to manipulate you or create a record that helps their case. From this point forward, all communication goes through me." She handed me her card. "I'm filing the paperwork tomorrow morning. Olivia will be served by the end of the day. Things are going to get ugly very quickly. The Hartwells will bring in their lawyers, who will be expensive and aggressive. Your father will probably try to pressure you to drop this. Your mother will appeal to your sense of family. Your brother will beg for forgiveness. You need to be ready for all of that. I'm ready, I said, and was surprised to find I meant it. Rebecca studied me for a moment, and her expression softened slightly. Marcus, I have to ask, are you doing this for the money or for revenge? Does it matter? Legally? No. Personally? Yes. Because if this is about revenge, you need to understand that revenge is expensive. Emotionally, psychologically, financially. You're about to burn down your entire life, your family, your career, your social circle. Everything will change. Everyone will take sides. And even if you win, even if you get every penny you're owed and destroy their reputations in the process, you'll still be the guy whose wife loved his brother. I know, I said quietly. And you still want to do this? I thought about standing on the dance floor alone and humiliated. I thought about 2 years of lies and manipulation. I thought about my father's cold calculation and my brother's errors and Olivia's pale face. I thought about the man I'd been yesterday morning, naive and trusting and stupidly, willfully blind. I want to do this, I said. Not because of revenge, because of truth. They lied to me, used me, and tried to arrange my entire life around their convenience. They need to understand that has consequences. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then let's give them consequences they'll never forget. I left Rebecca's office feeling strangely calm. The panic of the previous night had crystallized into something harder, something more focused. I had a plan, I had a lawyer, I had documentation and witnesses and an ironclad prenuptial agreement. More importantly, I had clarity. My phone buzzed with a new message as I walked to the subway. Against my better judgment, I looked. Daniel. Marcus, please. I'm at your building. I need to talk to you. I need to explain. Please, Bueno. I almost deleted it, almost blocked his number and moved on. But something stopped me. Not forgiveness, not even curiosity, but a cold desire to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I texted back. Coffee shop on the corner. 15 minutes. Come alone. Then I called Rebecca. I'm meeting with Daniel, I said. I know you said not to contact them, but record it, Rebecca interrupted. New York is a one-party consent state, record everything. And Marcus, don't lose your temper. Let him talk. Let him confess. Give me ammunition. I stopped at a drugstore and bought a small digital recorder, the kind students use for lectures. By the time I reached the coffee shop, a generic chain place with brown leather chairs and overpriced lattes, Daniel was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking like he hadn't slept. He was still wearing clothes from the wedding, though he'd changed out of his tuxedo into jeans and a rumpled dress shirt. His eyes were red. His hair, usually perfectly styled, stuck up in odd angles. He looked broken, and I felt nothing. Marcus, he said as I sat down, his voice cracking. Thank you for... I'm recording this conversation, I said, placing the recorder on the table between us. Do you consent to being recorded? He stared at the device, then at me, and something died in his expression. Yeah, he said quietly. I consent. I turned on the recorder. Tell me everything, I said. And I mean everything. When it started, how it started. Every lie you told me. Every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to be my brother while you were fucking my fiancé. All of it. Daniel's hands shook as he wrapped them around his untouched coffee cup. It started at your 6-month anniversary dinner, he began. You'd invited me to celebrate. You were so happy showing her off, talking about your future together. And I was happy for you, Marcus. I swear I was. But then you got called away by work, remember? That emergency with the Riverside property? And it was just me and Olivia at the table. I remembered. A pipe had burst in one of our buildings. I'd spent 2 hours on the phone with contractors and insurance adjusters while Daniel entertained Olivia. We started talking, Daniel continued, really talking, not just polite small talk, about art and philosophy and all these things I never got to discuss with anyone. Dad always wanted us to talk business. Mom always wanted us to talk family. But Olivia talked about ideas, about dreams, about who we were when nobody was watching. So you bonded over philosophy, I said flatly. Then what? Then nothing. Not for months. I tried to stay away. I did, Marcus. I really tried, but you kept bringing us together. Family dinners, company events. You wanted your girlfriend and your brother to be close. You wanted us to be friends. The irony was bitter. I had wanted that, had actively encouraged it. When did it turn physical? Daniel flinched at the question. Your first anniversary. You had that weekend business trip to Chicago. You asked me to check on Olivia, make sure she wasn't lonely. So I went over. We were going to watch a movie, just hang out. But we had wine and we started talking and spare me the romance novel version, I interrupted. You fucked her. In our apartment. In our bed? The couch, he whispered. It was the couch. The couch I'd woken up on this morning. The couch I'd slept on hundreds of times. The couch I'd bought with Olivia, picked out together at some furniture store on a Saturday afternoon, debating between leather and fabric like it was the most important decision in the world. And after that? After that, it became regular. Whenever you traveled, whenever you worked late, we were careful. We never met in public, never texted anything explicit. We used burner phones and encrypted apps. You planned it, I said. You didn't stumble into an affair. You constructed an entire infrastructure to hide it. I know how it sounds. Do you? Do you know how it sounds to hear that my brother and my fiancé were running a covert operation to betray me? That you had burner phones and encryption like you were spies instead of family? Daniel's face crumpled. I'm sorry, he sobbed. Marcus, I'm so fucking sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. You're my brother. Don't, I said coldly. Don't you dare tell me you love me. People who love each other don't do this. People who love each other don't conspire and scheme and lie for years while smiling to your face. I do love you, Daniel insisted, but I also love her. And I know that doesn't make sense. I know it's fucked up. But it's true, I love you both, and I've been torn apart for 2 years trying to figure out how to make this right. Here's how you make it right, I said. You tell me about Dad, about the Harris Peninsula project, about how he found out and what he offered you to keep quiet. Daniel went very still. I don't know what you... Don't lie to me. Not anymore. Dad created that project to give you cover for the affair. When did he find out? How? A long silence. Then quietly, he saw us. When? About 6 months after it started. We'd met at a hotel. We thought we were being careful, but Dad was there for a business dinner. He saw us in the lobby. There was no explaining it away. What did he do? He took us to his office the next day, both of us. Told us we were idiots and reckless and going to destroy the family. But then, Daniel paused and something like bitterness crossed his face. Then he said he could make it work. Said you and Olivia were already engaged by then. Said if we could just hold out until after the wedding, until the Hartwell partnership was secured, he'd help us. He'd give me a real project, something that would set me up independently. He'd help facilitate a quiet divorce for you and Olivia once enough time had passed. He said everyone would win. Everyone except me. He said you'd be fine. Said you'd understand eventually. Said you were pragmatic and reasonable, and you'd see the business advantages of having Hartwell as an ally even if the marriage didn't work out. And you believed him? You thought I'd just accept being cuckolded for business purposes? I didn't know what to believe, Daniel said miserably. I wanted to believe him because it meant I could have Olivia. And I know that makes me selfish and terrible, but I wanted it her, Marcus. I wanted her so much I was willing to let you marry her first. That's how far gone I was. The confession hung in the air between us. I studied my brother, this man I'd grown up with, played basketball with, worked alongside, trusted implicitly, and saw a stranger. Someone capable of rationalizing anything if it got him what he wanted. The toast, I said, at the wedding, that was your idea or hers? Hers. I told her not to do it, told her we should wait, play it safe, follow Dad's plan, but she said she was tired of waiting. Said she couldn't marry you without everyone knowing the truth. She wanted it out in the open. So she decided to humiliate me in front of 300 people instead of just calling off the wedding. She didn't think of it as humiliation. She thought, Daniel stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. She thought what? She thought you'd understand, that you'd appreciate her honesty, that you'd rather know the truth than live a lie. I almost laughed. The delusion was spectacular. Tell me about yesterday morning, and I said, before the wedding. Did you talk to her? Daniel nodded. She was scared, said she didn't know if she could go through with it. I told her we'd made it this far, we should stick to the plan. But she said she couldn't look at you and lie anymore, couldn't say vows she didn't mean. But she did, I pointed out. She said the vows. She signed the marriage license. She did all of it, right up until the moment she decided to drop her truth bomb at the reception. She was conflicted. She was manipulative, I corrected. She wanted her grand moment. She wanted to make a statement. And she didn't care that doing it that way would destroy me, my reputation, my relationship with our family. She cared about her drama, her narrative, her feelings. I leaned forward, looking my brother in the eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Daniel. I'm divorcing Olivia. The prenup has an adultery clause that triggers $1 million payment to me. I have 300 witnesses to her confession, plus whatever evidence my lawyer digs up. She's going to lose, and she's going to pay. Daniel's face went pale. Marcus, she doesn't have that kind of money. Then she should have thought of that before she committed adultery. Her problem, not mine. Her father will destroy you. You know what Hartwell is capable of. He'll come after your career, your reputation. Let him try. I'm done being afraid of powerful men and their threats. I'm done being the good son who goes along to get along. I'm done being your convenient patsy. I stood, pocketing the recorder. Stay away from me, Daniel. Stay away from my apartment, my workplace, anywhere I might be. If you want to be with Olivia, that's your choice. But you don't get to have that and me too. You chose her. Live with it. Marcus, please. He reached for me and I stepped back. One more thing, I said. I'm resigning from Chen Development. I'm done working with Dad. Done being part of a family that sees me as a chess piece instead of a person. You can have it all, the company, the inheritance, Dad's approval. All I want is my freedom. I left him sitting there, crying into his coffee, and walked out into the cold November afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of amber and gold, and I felt lighter than I had in years. My phone buzzed. Rebecca. Rebecca. How did it go? Marcus. Got everything on tape. Confession, timeline, Dad's involvement. It's all there, Boyle. Rebecca. Beautiful. Send me the file. And Marcus, get some rest. The real battle starts tomorrow. I went home to my empty apartment, forwarded the recording to Rebecca, and ordered takeout from the Thai place down the street. While I waited for the food, I changed the background on my phone, removed the photo of me and Olivia, replaced it with a picture of mountains I'd taken on a hiking trip before I'd ever met her. Then I blocked everyone. Olivia, Daniel, my parents, everyone except Dave, Rebecca, and a handful of friends I knew had my back. My phone immediately became quieter. No more messages lighting up the screen, no more guilt trips or apologies or attempts at manipulation. Just silence. And in that silence, I ate my pad thai and drank my beer and watched the sunset fade into night, thinking about the man I'd been and the man I was becoming. Tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest. Tomorrow, lawyers would file papers and make threats and start the machinery of litigation. But tonight, I was just Marcus Chen, alone in an apartment that was finally, genuinely mine, watching the city lights twinkle on like stars. And for the first time since Olivia had walked past me to dance with my brother, I felt something approaching peace. Monday morning came with unseasonable warmth, as if the universe was mocking the frozen wasteland of my personal life. I woke early, put on my most expensive suit, the charcoal Tom Ford I usually reserve for major client meetings, and arrived at the Chen Development offices at 7:30 a.m., a full hour before anyone else. The building was a monument to my family's success, 35 stories of glass and steel in the financial district, with our company occupying the top 5 floors. I'd been coming here since I was a kid, had my first office here at 22, had believed I'd spend my career here building something meaningful. That belief had died along with everything else. I went straight to my office. A corner space on the 34th floor with views of the harbor and walls covered with architectural renderings of properties I'd helped acquire. My desk held 3 years of work, deal files, financial models, market analyses, 3 years of building my father's empire. I packed it all into boxes. Every personal item, every photo, every commendation and award. When I was done, my office looked like it belonged to a ghost, empty and impersonal and waiting for the next occupant. My assistant, Jennifer, arrived at 8:30 and stopped in her tracks when she saw the boxes. Mr. Chen, she was a recent college grad, sharp and ambitious, with dreams of becoming a real estate developer herself. What's happening? I'm resigning, I said simply, effective immediately. You'll report to Daniel going forward. Her face went through several emotions, shock, confusion, concern, before settling on professional neutrality. May I ask why? Personal reasons. You'll hear about it soon enough. Probably already have, if anyone here follows social media. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Of course she'd seen. Everyone had seen. My wedding disaster was probably the most talked about event in our professional and social circles. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what it's worth, everyone thinks what they did was horrible. Everyone? Everyone who matters. The assistants, the junior staff. We all think it was cruel. The solidarity was unexpected and touching. Thank you, Jennifer, for everything. You're going to do great things here, with or without me. I left the boxes on in my desk with a note for building security to ship them to my apartment, then went down one floor to my father's office. He was already there, of course. Alexander Chen didn't believe in arriving late or leaving early. He believed in discipline and routine and maintaining appearances, even when everything was falling apart. He looked up when I entered, his expression carefully neutral. Marcus, I didn't expect you in today. I'm not in. I'm resigning. I placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. My formal resignation letter, drafted by Rebecca at midnight and printed at a 24-hour business center. My father read it slowly, his face revealing nothing. This is unnecessary, he said finally. What happened at the wedding was unfortunate, but we're family. We can work through this. We're not family, boy, I said calmly. Family doesn't conspire against each other. Family doesn't use each other as pawns. Family doesn't facilitate affairs and construct elaborate lies. Marcus, I'm done, Dad, with the company, with the family business, with pretending any of this was ever about anything other than money and power and your legacy. He set down the letter and leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same analytical gaze he used to evaluate properties and negotiations. You're making a mistake, he said. You're emotional. You're hurt. I understand that. But walking away from this company means walking away from your future. Everything I've built is meant to be yours and Daniel's. Everything. Give it all to Daniel, I said. He's earned it. He fucked my wife for 2 years while you facilitated it. That's the kind of dedication to family business you value, right? My father's jaw tightened, the first crack in his composure. What happened between Daniel and Olivia was unfortunate, but it doesn't change the fundamental reality of our situation. Hartwell Industries is still a valuable partner. The marriage, your marriage still has potential to be salvaged if we handle this correctly. I stared at him, genuinely amazed. You still think this can be salvaged? You think I'm going to stay married to a woman who publicly declared her love for my brother? I think you're smart enough to separate emotion from business. Olivia's father is willing to overlook this incident if I overlook being cheated on and humiliated, if I play the docile husband while my wife fucks my brother, that's your idea of salvaging the situation? I'm saying that divorce is expensive and messy and damages everyone involved. An annulment would be cleaner, but it raises questions about the marriage's validity from the start, which impacts the Hartwell partnership. The best option is to maintain the marriage publicly while making private arrangements that work for everyone. Private arrangements, I repeated, like Daniel getting Olivia as a mistress while I play her husband for business purposes? That's your solution? It's a pragmatic solution. People have maintained stranger arrangements for less compelling reasons. I shook my head slowly. You're insane. You're genuinely insane if you think I'd agree to that. Marcus, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm reasonably divorcing my cheating wife, reasonably enforcing the prenuptial agreement that requires her to pay me $1 million for her adultery, and reasonably resigning from a company run by a man who values partnerships over his own son's dignity. I moved toward the door, then stopped. Oh, and Dad, you might want to call your lawyer, because when my divorce proceedings start making the rounds, people are going to have questions about the Harris Peninsula project, about how you created a fake business venture to cover up your son's affairs. That's fraud, by the way, corporate fraud, the kind that gets investigated by the SE and state attorneys general. His face went pale. You wouldn't. Watch me. I left his office and took the elevator down to the lobby, nodding to security guards I'd known for years. Walking past the marble reception desk with the Chen Development logo etched in gold, and out into the November morning that suddenly felt full of possibility instead of dread. My phone rang. Rebecca. Olivia's been served, she said without preamble. Her lawyers called me 30 seconds ago. They want to negotiate. Already? The prenup is ironclad and they know it. They're trying to get ahead of this before it goes public. I told them we'd consider settlement discussions, but only on our terms. What are our terms? Complete transparency, full disclosure of assets, admission of adultery, and the $1 million, obviously. Plus you keep the apartment and any jointly held property. She walks away with nothing except the clothes on her back. Will she agree? Not without a fight. Her lawyer is Marcus Dennison at Hartwell and Associates. Yes, her father's firm, which is a conflict of interest I plan to exploit. He's already making noises about the prenup being unconscionable and signed under duress. It wasn't under duress. We negotiated it for weeks. I know that, you know that, but they're going to argue it anyway, claim your father pressured her, claim she didn't understand the terms. Standard defense when you're cornered. What do? We document everything. I need financial records, emails, text messages, anything that shows your separate and joint assets. I need proof the prenup was negotiated fairly. And I need you to stay calm and not do anything stupid, like confronting Olivia or her father. Too late on the last one, I admitted. I met with Daniel yesterday, but I recorded it. Tell me you got something useful? Full confession, timeline, details, Dad's involvement, everything. Rebecca made a satisfied sound. Send it to me immediately. This is better than Christmas. I forwarded the recording from a coffee shop 2 blocks from my former office, then sat there nursing a latte and watching people rush past on their way to jobs and lives and dramas of their own. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Robert Hartwell. We need to talk. My office, 2 p.m. today. I showed it to Rebecca via screenshot. Marcus, should I go? Rebecca, normally I'd say no, but I want to know what he's thinking. Go, but record everything. And don't agree to anything without calling me first. At 2 p.m. exactly, I walked into the offices of Hartwell Industries on Park Avenue. The reception area was all marble and mahogany, old money aesthetics designed to intimidate and impress. Robert Hartwell's assistant, a severe woman in her 50s, escorted me directly to his office without pleasantries. Robert Hartwell was in his late 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone who'd spent his life making decisions that affected thousands of people and losing no sleep over it. His office was a museum of success, photographs with presidents and mayors, framed awards, a wall devoted to architectural renderings of his developments. Marcus, he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, calculated to be exactly hard enough to show strength without crossing into aggression. Thank you for coming. Mr. Hartwell. I sat in the chair he indicated, a leather affair that was deliberately lower than his own, a power play older than time. I suppose you know why I asked you here. I assume it's about my divorce from your daughter. Among other things, he settled into his chair, steepling his fingers. Let me be direct, Marcus. This situation is unfortunate for everyone involved. Olivia made an error in judgment. Your brother made an error in judgment. But these errors don't need to destroy everyone's futures. Your definition of error in judgment is interesting, I said. Most people would call it prolonged affair or systematic betrayal. Semantics, he dismissed. The point is, what's done is done. Now we need to determine how to minimize damage and move forward. I am moving forward with a divorce. A divorce that will cost my daughter $1 million according to a prenuptial agreement I consider legally dubious. Your lawyers drafted it. Under pressure from your father. The agreement was presented to Olivia 48 hours before your wedding. She signed under duress. She had 3 months to review it, I corrected, and she had her own attorneys present during negotiations. The only duress was from your own firm's partners trying to get the best deal for your family. Robert's expression hardened slightly. Nevertheless, we'll be challenging it, and in the meantime, I want to discuss alternatives. There are no alternatives. Your daughter committed adultery. The prenup is clear. She pays or we go to court and the prenup gets enforced anyway. Except now everyone's legal bills are higher and the whole mess is public record. That's one way to look at it, Robert said. Here's another way. You drop the divorce and the financial claims. In exchange, I bring you into Hartwell Industries as a senior partner. You get equity, decision-making authority, and a path to eventually running one of the largest real estate firms in the state. You get everything you'd have gotten at Chen Development, plus independence from your father. I stared at him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an empire. Marcus, you're talented. Everyone knows it. You've been wasted at Chen Development, playing second fiddle to your father's ego and your brother's charm. I can give you a platform where your skills actually matter. In exchange for staying married to your daughter who doesn't love me. In exchange for a business arrangement that benefits both our families. What Olivia does in her private life is her business. What you do in yours is yours. But publicly, you maintain the marriage. You present a united front, and you build something significant. The offer was breathtaking in its cynicism and its accuracy. He'd identified exactly what motivated me, the desire to build, to create, to matter, and was dangling it like bait. And Daniel, I asked, where does he fit in this arrangement? Daniel is irrelevant. If Olivia wants to maintain a relationship with him, that's her choice. But it doesn't affect your position or prospects. So I get to be the cuckold with a good job. Robert's expression didn't change. You get to be a powerful man with a successful career. How you frame that is your choice. I stood up. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Hartwell. But I'm not interested in building an empire on a foundation of lies and humiliation. I'll take my chances with the divorce. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice hardening. I've been tolerant until now because I hoped you'd be reasonable. But if you insist on pursuing this divorce and demanding payment under that prenup, you'll find out what it's like to have Hartwell Industries as an enemy. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. I have relationships throughout this city in real estate, finance, media, government. I can make your life very difficult, Marcus. I can ensure no reputable firm will hire you. I can tie up your divorce in court for years. I can leak information about your family's business practices that will interest federal investigators. You mean the fake Harris Peninsula project? I asked calmly. I'm aware. In fact, I'm counting on it coming out. Because when it does, everyone will understand that the Chen family and the Hartwell family conspired to use me as a pawn. That generates sympathy, Mr. Hartwell. That makes me the victim, not the villain. His eyes narrowed. You've thought this through. I've had a very educational 48 hours. I moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Your daughter didn't just make an error in judgment. She made a choice. Multiple choices, over multiple years, to betray me while accepting my trust and affection. Those weren't mistakes. Those were decisions. And decisions have consequences. I left him sitting there, his threat hanging in the air like smoke, and took the elevator down to street level, feeling oddly exhilarated. Robert Hartwell was everything I'd expected. Powerful, ruthless, willing to sacrifice anyone, including his daughter, in service of his empire. But I wasn't afraid of him. Maybe I should have been. Maybe the smart play was to take the deal accept the job, build my career on whatever terms were available. That's certainly what the old Marcus would have done. The Marcus who believed in pragmatism and compromise and playing the long game. But that Marcus was dead. The man who walked out of Hartwell Industries into the November afternoon was someone different, someone harder. Someone who discovered that the freedom that comes from having nothing left to lose is its own kind of power. My phone rang, my mother. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity or maybe some remaining shred of filial obligation made me pick up. Mom, Marcus, please come home. Her voice was tight with strain. We need to talk as a family. We're not a family. We're a criminal conspiracy that shares DNA. Don't say that. You're angry and you have every right to be, but what? But I should forgive Daniel for fucking my wife? But I should forgive Ben for facilitating it? But I should just accept that my entire family views me as a useful idiot who can be manipulated for everyone else's benefit? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Mom? Explain it to me. Make it make sense. A long silence. Then quietly, I didn't know. About Daniel and Olivia, your father told me they were close, that Daniel had feelings for her, but he said it was under control. He said everything would work out. You knew Daniel had feelings for my fiancée, and you said nothing? I thought he'd get over it. I thought once you were married, once everything was settled, it would fade. These things usually do. People develop crushes. They get past them. Mom, they had a 2-year affair with burner phones and encryption and secret meetings. That's not a crush. That's a relationship. I know, she said, and now she was crying. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have said something. I should have warned you, but I thought I was protecting the family. I thought if we could just get through the wedding, everything would be okay. The tragic thing was, I believed her. My mother had spent 40 years protecting this family, smoothing over conflicts, maintaining appearances. She'd probably convinced herself that silence was kindness, that ignorance was protection. I'm divorcing Olivia, I told her. I'm suing for the prenup damages, and I'm done with Chen Development. Those things are happening whether you like it or not. But where will you go? What will you do? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I'm good at what I do, Mom. I don't need Dad's company to be successful. Please, Marcus, come to dinner tonight. Talk to your father. Talk to Daniel. We can fix this if we just communicate. There's nothing to fix, and I'm done communicating with people who only speak in lies and manipulation. I hung up before she could respond and immediately felt guilty, which made me angry, even now. Even after everything, some part of me wanted to be the good son, the peacemaker, the one who made everyone comfortable. That part needed to die too. Rebecca called as I was walking through Washington Square Park, watching students and tourists and street performers do their various dances. How did it go with Hartwell? I told her about the job offer, the threat, the whole calculated pitch. That's actually good news, Rebecca said when I finished. He's scared. If he wasn't scared, he wouldn't be offering deals or making threats. He'd be quiet, letting his lawyers handle it. The fact that he's personally involved means he knows the prenup is enforceable and he's trying to find leverage. What about his threat to tie this up in court? He can try, but Marcus, you have something most people don't in these situations: time and resources. You're not desperate. You don't need a quick settlement. You can afford to wait this out while your lawyer, that's me, bleeds their resources dry with discovery and depositions and motions. And his threat about making me unemployable? Harder to enforce than you'd think. Yes, he has influence, but you have skills and a reputation separate from your father's company. Plus, once word gets out about what Olivia did, and it will get out, I'll make sure of it, you'll have sympathy. People love a wronged husband story, especially when the wronged husband handles it with dignity instead of violence. Is that what I'm doing? Handling it with dignity? You're handling it like a professional. That's better than dignity. That's power. I thought about that as I walked home through darkening streets. Power, the word had always meant something different to me before. Money, position, authority. The kind of power my father wielded, the kind Robert Hartwell traded in. But maybe there was a different kind of power, the power of walking away, the power of saying no, the power of refusing to be used, even when saying yes would be easier and more profitable. The power of truth, even when truth was painful. That night, alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of decent whiskey, I made a list. Not of what I'd lost, but of what I still had. My professional reputation, so far. My skills and experience. A prenuptial agreement that entitled me to $1 million, a lawyer who was scarier than anyone I'd ever met, the truth. No more illusions, that last one might have been the most valuable. For 2 years, I'd been living in a carefully constructed fiction. Now the fiction was gone, and what remained was real. Painful and difficult and uncertain, but real. I could work with real. I could build something from real. The whiskey was good, smooth and warming, and I poured myself another glass and toasted the empty apartment. To new beginnings, I said to the silence, and to never again confusing pretty lies for ugly truths. The city lights twinkled through my windows, thousands of lives unfolding in parallel, thousands of stories being written. Mine was just one among many, just another tale of betrayal and recovery, of trust broken and slowly rebuilt. But it was my story now, not my father's, not Daniel's, not Olivia's, mine. And I was going to write one hell of an ending. The first week after my resignation from Chen Development passed in a strange blur of legal meetings and strategic planning. Rebecca had me on a tight schedule, depositions to prepare for, financial documents to organize, a timeline of the affair to construct with forensic precision. Every email I'd sent Olivia, every text message, every credit card statement that might show suspicious charges, all of it went into building our case. But the more interesting development came from an unexpected source. On Thursday morning, I received an email from a woman named Patricia Keene. The subject line read, "Former Chen Development employee, information you need." I almost deleted it as spam. Then I saw the first line. "Mr. Chen, we've never met, but I worked in accounting at your father's company for 6 years until I was terminated last month. I have information about the Harris Peninsula project that you need to see. If you're interested, meet me at the Starbucks on Aiken and Lex at 2 p.m. today. I'll be the redhead with the Talbot's briefcase." I forwarded it to Rebecca with a question mark. Her response came 30 seconds later. "Go and record everything." Patricia Keene turned out to be a woman in her mid-50s with precise movements and the air of someone who'd spent her career dealing with other people's numbers and mess. She sat in the corner of the Starbucks with a venti coffee and a manila folder thick with papers. "Mr. Chen," she said when I approached, not standing or offering to shake hands. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I'm curious," I said, sitting across from her with my own coffee and my phone recording in my pocket. "You said you had information about Harris Peninsula." "I have proof it never existed." She tapped the folder. 6 months of fabricated expenses, fake invoices, shell company payments. Your father created an entire fictional project and ran hundreds of thousands of dollars through it. My heart rate picked up. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your father fired me when I started asking questions about the accounting irregularities. Gave me 2 weeks severance and an NDA I signed under duress, then escorted me out by security like I was a criminal." Her voice was bitter. 26 years I gave that company. 6 at Chen Development, 20 before that at firms your father absorbed. And he discarded me like garbage because I was doing my job too well. "What kind of irregularities?" She opened the folder and pulled out a spreadsheet. The Harris Peninsula project was set up as a subsidiary LLC, Harris Peninsula Development Group. Standard practice for large projects. But when I started reviewing the quarterly reports, things didn't add up. The expenses were too generic. Travel costs that didn't correspond to actual business travel. Consulting fees paid to companies that existed on paper but had no real operations. Architectural renderings that were stock images purchased online. She pushed the spreadsheet toward me. It was dense with numbers, but certain patterns jumped out even to my non-accountant eyes. Recurring payments to the same shell companies. Round numbers that suggested someone had made up figures rather than tracking actual expenses. I flagged it in an internal audit, Patricia continued. Asked your father for documentation, permits, contracts, anything to substantiate these costs. He told me it was all confidential, that the investors required discretion. When I pressed, he fired me. Do you have copies of everything? Everything. She patted the folder. I made backups before they deleted my access. Call it insurance against exactly this kind of situation. Why not go to the authorities yourself? The NDA, she said simply. I signed it. If I violate it, I lose my severance and your father sues me for damages. I can't afford that fight. But you, she looked at me with something like hope. Your family, you're already in a fight with him, and you have resources I don't. I understood. She wanted me to be her weapon, her proxy in a war she couldn't fight directly. What do you want in return? I want him exposed. I want everyone to know Alexander Chen is a fraud. And I want a reference letter for my next job from you, not him, acknowledging my years of competent service. That's all? That's everything. I don't care about money or revenge beyond justice. I care about my professional reputation. I care about being able to tell the truth about why I left. I made a decision. Give me the folder, I'll get it to my lawyer. And yes, I'll write you a reference letter, a glowing one. Relief washed over her face. She slid the folder across the table and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Thank you, she said quietly. You're not like your father, Mr. Chen. Everyone who worked with you knew that. You were fair, decent. We were all sorry when you resigned. The compliment shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but after a week of feeling like I'd lost it everything, hearing that I'd mattered to someone, that people had noticed how I treated them, felt like a lifeline. Call me Marcus, I said. And Patricia, thank you for your courage. This takes guts. So does what you're doing, she replied. Walking away from everything you knew, fighting your whole family. That takes more guts than I've got. I left Starbucks with the folder and immediately called Rebecca from the street. I have a bomb, I told her, and talk to me. I explained about Patricia, the documents, the shell companies, and fake expenses. Rebecca was silent for a long moment after I finished. Marcus, this is bigger than your divorce. This is potential criminal fraud. Your father created a fake business entity, ran money through it, claimed business deductions on it. That's wire fraud, tax fraud, probably money laundering depending on how he structured the payments. So what do? We use it as leverage. I'll have forensic accountants verify these documents, make sure they're legitimate and not some disgruntled employee's fabrication. If they check out, and I suspect they will, we approach your father with a proposal. He doesn't contest the divorce or the prenup enforcement, and we don't hand this evidence to the IRS and FBI. That's blackmail. That's negotiation. Your father understands leverage. Let's speak his language. 2 days later, I sat in Rebecca's office while she video conferenced with my father's attorney, a man named Gregory Walsh, who'd represented Chen Development for 20 years. My client has received your proposal, Walsh said, his face pixelated slightly on the screen, and he finds it deeply offensive that his own son would threaten him with criminal charges over a business disagreement. It's not a business disagreement, Rebecca replied coolly. It's documented fraud. We have 6 months of fabricated expenses, shell company payments, and falsified project reports. We have testimony from a former employee who was fired for asking questions. And we're prepared to hand all of it to federal authorities unless your client agrees to our terms. Those documents were obtained illegally. They were obtained by a former employee who retained copies of her work product before being terminated. That's not illegal. What is illegal is creating fake business entities to facilitate your client's conspiracy to hide his son's affair. Walsh's jaw tightened. You're making serious accusations. I'm stating facts. Facts that will look very bad in a courtroom. Facts that will interest the SEC, the IRS, and possibly the FBI's white-collar crime division. Facts that will destroy your client's reputation and business interests. Unless Mr. Chen agrees to 3 conditions. 1, he doesn't contest Marcus's divorce from Olivia Hartwell. 2, he doesn't contest enforcement of the prenuptial agreement's adultery clause. 3, he provides Marcus with a separation agreement from Chen Development That includes 18 months' salary and a non-disparagement clause. That's extortion. That's a very generous offer considering the alternative is federal prison. Your client has 24 hours to decide. Rebecca ended the call before Walsh could respond. Then she turned to me with a slight smile. And now we wait. You think he'll take it? I think he's a pragmatist. He'll weigh the key, a divorce he was going to fight anyway, money he was going to have to pay in legal fees, a separation agreement that's generous but not excessive, against the risk of criminal prosecution. He'll take it. And if he doesn't, then we hand everything to the authorities and watch his empire burn. But Marcus, I need you to be sure. If we go that route, your father likely goes to prison. Your family's business collapses. Your brother Daniel, who was nominally involved in the fake project, probably faces charges too. Everyone loses. I thought about my father, about the cold calculation with which he'd orchestrated my humiliation, about the ease with which he'd sacrificed my happiness for business advantage. I thought about Daniel, crying into his coffee, insisting he loved me even while he'd betrayed me. I thought about my mother caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her sons, choosing silence over truth. I'm sure, I said. Rebecca nodded. Then we wait. 23 hours later, Walsh called back. My father had accepted the terms. The divorce would proceed uncontested. Olivia would pay the $1 million. Her father would cover it. Another detail negotiated behind the scenes. Within 30 days, I would receive my separation agreement and 18 months' salary. And most importantly, everyone would sign non-disclosure agreements preventing anyone from discussing the Harris Peninsula fraud. It's done, Rebecca said after we'd reviewed the settlement documents. You won. But I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt empty, hollowed out, like I'd burned down my entire life to make a point. What do I do now? I asked. Whatever you want. You have money, freedom, and no obligations. Most people would kill for that. Most people know who they are without their family and career defining them. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, studying me with that unsettling intensity that made her such an effective lawyer. Marcus, can I give you some advice? Not as your attorney, but as someone who's been where you are? I nodded. You're going to go through a phase where you question everything, every relationship, every decision, every belief you held about yourself in the world. It's going to be uncomfortable and scary, and you're going to want to rush through it, to find new certainties to replace the old ones. She paused. Don't. Sit with the uncertainty. Let yourself not know for a while, because the person you discover in that uncertainty, that's who you actually are. Not your father's son, not Daniel's brother, not Olivia's husband, just you. And if I don't like who I find, then you change, but my guess, you're going to like yourself just fine. The divorce was finalized on a gray February morning, exactly 91 days after the wedding. I signed the papers in Rebecca's office, watched her notarize them, and officially became unmarried again. Olivia didn't attend. We'd negotiated everything through lawyers and hadn't spoken directly since that night at the Plaza Terrace. I'd seen photos of her online. Society pages still covered the Hartwell family, and she looked thinner, older somehow. Tabloids speculated about her relationship with Daniel, whether they were together now, whether my father approved. I didn't care, or rather I cared less each day, watching the emotional investment fade like a photograph left too long in sunlight. The $1 million hit my account a week later. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like money, useful, certainly, but not transformative, not healing. I used some of it to rent a house in the Berkshires for the month of March. A small cabin by a lake, no internet, minimal cell service. I told Rebecca where I'd be and made everyone else believe I'd left the country. The cabin was exactly what I needed. Quiet. I spent my days hiking, reading books I'd been meaning to get to for years, sitting on the porch and watching the lake freeze and thaw as winter gave way to early spring. I cooked simple meals, chopped wood for the fireplace, and learned to exist in silence. Some days I thought about Olivia and Daniel obsessively, picking at the wound like a scab. Other days, I went hours without thinking of them at all, caught up in the rhythm of simple tasks and natural beauty. I thought a lot about my father. about the empire he'd built and the prices he'd paid, about whether he'd ever loved anything that couldn't be monetized or leveraged, about whether I was more like him than I wanted to admit, whether my pursuit of the prenup money and the settlement was really about justice or just about winning in the only language he understood. The conclusion I reached wasn't comfortable. It was probably both. Justice and winning weren't always opposites. Sometimes holding people accountable was how you won. Sometimes winning was its own form of justice. What mattered was being honest about your motivations instead of dressing revenge in noble language. I called Dave in the third week. He answered on the first ring. Jesus Christ, Marcus, where are you? I've been worried sick. Somewhere quiet, I needed to think. Think about what? How to spend your divorce settlement? Because I have suggestions, and they all involve boats and tropical islands. I laughed and it felt good. Maybe later. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out who I am when I'm not busy being someone's son or husband or business partner. And who are you? Still figuring that out, but I think I might be okay. You're more than okay, man. You're a goddamn phoenix. You rose from the ashes of that dumpster fire and came out stronger. I came out alone. Alone isn't the same as lonely, and you're not alone anyway. You have friends, people who actually give a shit about you, not what you can do for them. Thanks, Dave. Anytime. And Marcus, when you're ready to rejoin civilization, call me. We'll get drinks. We'll make plans, boys. We'll figure out your next move together. After we hung up, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, thinking about friendship and loyalty and the difference between people who loved you and people who used you. Dave had never used me, not once in 15 years of friendship. He'd been there through everything: college stress, career anxiety, wedding planning, catastrophic humiliation, without asking for anything in return except that I keep showing up honestly. That was worth more than any business deal or family connection. That was real. I returned to the city in early April to a world that had mostly moved on from my scandal. There were new society dramas to gossip about, new weddings to attend, new disasters to dissect. My wedding disaster was old news, relegated to remember when conversations. My apartment felt strange, still mine, but haunted by the person I'd been. I spent a weekend purging it of anything that reminded me of Olivia. Photos, gifts, clothes she'd left behind. I donated most of it to charity and threw away the rest, until the space felt clean and uncluttered and genuinely mine. Then I started rebuilding. Rebecca had been right about my professional reputation. Word had gotten around that I'd resigned on principle, that I'd refused to participate in my family's dysfunction. A few companies reached out with job offers. I declined them all, not because they weren't good, but because I realized I didn't want to work for someone else anymore. I wanted to build something of my own. Using the settlement money as seed capital, I started Chen Properties, deliberately keeping my last name because I'd earned it, because it represented 25 years of my work and reputation, not just my father's legacy. My focus was small-scale residential developments in overlooked neighborhoods, the kind of projects that made communities better instead of just making developers richer. It was risky. It was probably stupid from a pure profit perspective, but it was mine, and it meant something. Dave joined me as a partner after I pitched him over drinks at our favorite bar. He'd been wanting to leave his corporate law job for years, had expertise in real estate law that complemented my development skills. Together, we made a good team. By summer, we'd acquired our first property, a neglected apartment building in Queens that we planned to renovate and convert to affordable housing. The margins were thin, the work was hard, and every day brought new challenges. I loved it. I loved waking up with purpose again, loved making decisions based on what was right rather than what was profitable, loved working with people who respected me for my skills rather than my last name or connections. One evening in late June, I was at the Queens property overseeing some electrical work when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won. Hello? Marcus. Daniel's voice, uncertain and quiet. Please don't hang up. I should have. Every instinct screamed to end the call, block the number, maintain the boundaries I'd built. But something, maybe the exhaustion in his voice, maybe my own curiosity about what came next in this story, made me stay on the line. Talk fast, I said. I'm in therapy, have been since February, 3 times a week. I wanted you to know that. Why would I care? Because I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, why I hurt you, why I was capable of that kind of betrayal. And I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not the bullshit I said at the coffee shop. Okay, apologize. A long pause, then, I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry for betraying you. I'm sorry for lying to you. I'm sorry for letting Dad manipulate the situation. I'm sorry for standing as your best man while I was sleeping with your fiancé. I'm sorry for every moment of pain I caused you. And I'm sorry I can't undo any of it. The apology was better than the one at the coffee shop, more specific, more aware, but it still didn't change anything. Are you still with Olivia? I asked. No, we tried after everything settled. But it turns out we didn't actually like each other that much when we weren't sneaking around and lying to people. The affair was exciting. The relationship was just exhausting. I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and pity. They destroyed my marriage for a connection that couldn't survive honesty. What do you want, Daniel? Forgiveness? Absolution? Because I can't give you that. I don't want anything except for you to know I'm working on being better. And that if you ever decide you want to talk, really talk, I'll be here, but I understand if that never happens. It probably won't, I said honestly. You're my brother, and I don't wish you harm. But I also don't want you in my life. The person you were to me, the brother I trusted, doesn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. And I can't build a relationship with who you actually are. I understand. His voice cracked. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Chen Properties is impressive. You're doing good work. Don't follow my career. Can't help it. You're my brother. Then do it from a distance. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Get healthy. Be better. Just do it somewhere I'm not. I hung up before he could respond and stood there in the half-renovated building, surrounded by the physical evidence of destruction and reconstruction, thinking about forgiveness and boundaries and the difference between healing and reconciliation. I didn't forgive Daniel, maybe I never would, but I also didn't spend my days hating him anymore. He was just a person who'd made terrible choices, who was now living with the consequences. His journey was his own. Mine was here, in this building, building something real from ruins. In August, I got an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line was simple: birthday. Marcus, I know you don't want to see us. I understand why. But it's your father's 70th birthday next month, and it wouldn't be the same without you. No speeches, no drama, just family dinner. Please consider coming. Love, Mom. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, maintain the boundaries I'd established. But another part, the part that remembered birthday dinners before everything fell apart, my father carving the roast while telling stories about his early development deals, felt pulled. I called Rebecca for advice. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to see them. Part of me thinks that's weak. It's not weak to miss your family. It's human. The question is whether seeing them serves your healing or sets it back. How do I know? You don't. You make your best guess and live with the outcome. But Marcus, you're not the same person who walked away from that wedding. You've built something real. You've done the work. You're not going to fall back into old patterns just because you show up to one dinner. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I replied to my mother's email. I'll come, but I'm not staying late, and we're not discussing business or my personal mind. If anyone tries, I'm leaving. Her response came within minutes. Thank you. That's all I ask. The birthday dinner was at my parents' house in Westchester, the same house I'd grown up in. I arrived exactly on time, neither early nor late, and parked in the circular driveway behind cars I recognized. My mother's Mercedes, Daniel's BMW. My father's Tesla was in the garage, visible through the open door. He'd always loved that car, loved the statement it made about being forward-thinking and environmentally conscious while still being successful enough to afford luxury. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there older than I remembered, with new lines around her eyes and gray threading through her hair. "Marcus," she said, and pulled me into a hug before I could object. I let her, feeling the thinness of her frame, smelling her familiar perfume, something floral and expensive that she'd worn for decades. "Come in," she said. "Everyone's in the living room." Everyone turned out to be my father, Daniel, and Daniel's new girlfriend, a woman named Sarah whom I'd never met. Olivia notably was absent. "Marcus." My father stood, and for a moment we just looked at each other. He seemed older too, more stooped, with age spots on his hands I didn't remember seeing before. He extended his hand. I shook it. The gesture was formal, businesslike, a negotiation rather than a connection. "Happy birthday, Dad. Thank you for coming." We all sat down and the conversation was excruciating in its politeness. My mother asked about my company, careful questions that didn't probe too deeply. I asked about Chen development, equally careful. Daniel introduced Sarah, who seemed nice but overwhelmed by the family dynamics she'd walked into. Nobody mentioned the wedding. Nobody mentioned Olivia. Nobody mentioned the Harris Peninsula project or the settlement or any of the nuclear bombs that had detonated 9 months ago. We were all just playing parts in a performance called Normal Family Dinner. Dinner was prime rib, my father's favorite. My mother had cooked it herself or supervised the cooking, I wasn't sure which. We sat at the formal dining table, the one reserved for holidays and important occasions, with china and crystal and everything arranged just so. "Marcus," my father said during the main course, his voice carrying the weight of something rehearsed, "I owe you an apology." The table went silent. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Daniel stared at his plate. "I made decisions that prioritize business over your well-being," my father continued. "I facilitated a situation that caused you significant harm. That was wrong. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology was formal, almost legalistic, like he was reading from a script his therapist had written. But it was also, I suspected, the best Alexander Chen was capable of. "Thank you," I said, because what else could I say? "Your company is doing well," he added, "the Queen's project especially. It's innovative." "You've been following my work?" "Of course, you're my son." "I wasn't your son when you were using me as a pawn." The words came out before I could stop them. So much for keeping things pleasant. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You're right, and I understand if you can't forgive that. But I want you to know I'm proud of what you're building. It's different from what I would have done. Better, maybe." "Definitely better," my mother said quietly. "Because it's honest." The tension broke slightly. We finished dinner with less painful small talk, then moved to coffee and birthday cake, chocolate, my father's favorite, with "Happy Birthday, Alexander" written in precise script. I stayed for cake, for 1 cup of coffee, and then made my excuses. My mother walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. It meant a lot to him, to all of us. "I'm glad I came, but Mom, I need you to understand something. I can show up to birthday dinners. I can be polite, but we're never going back to what we were. That family doesn't exist anymore." "I know," she said sadly. "But maybe we can build something new, something smaller and more honest." "Maybe," I agreed, "but it's going to take time and effort, and all of you actually changing, not just apologizing." "We're trying, Marcus. Your father's in therapy too. Not as frequently as Daniel, but he's going. He's trying to understand why he is the way he is." "Good, that's a start." I hugged her goodbye and drove back to the city, feeling neither reconciled nor estranged, just somewhere in the middle, which was, I supposed, the most honest place to be. 2 years later, I stood in the courtyard of my newest project, a mixed-use development in Brooklyn with affordable housing units, small business spaces, and a community garden. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was small, just local residents and business owners and a few reporters from neighborhood papers. No society columns, no high society guests, no performance, just real people celebrating something real. Dave gave a short speech about community-focused development and sustainable urban planning. Then we cut the ribbon together while people applauded and took photos with their phones. Afterwards, a woman approached me, older, African-American with warm eyes and a firm handshake. Mr. Chen, I'm Sandra Williams. I'm renting one of the apartments here. Marcus, please. And I hope you're happy with it. Very happy. My old place, the landlord was trying to push us all out so he could renovate and charge triple. I thought I'd have to move out of the neighborhood I've lived in for 30 years. This place, what you're doing here, it's a godsend. That's why we do it, I said simply. Housing should be for people, not just profit. Your father wouldn't say that, she observed. I blinked, surprised. You know my father? Honey, everyone in real estate in this city knows Alexander Chen, and everyone knows what you're doing is different. You're not him. That matters. After she walked away, I stood in the courtyard thinking about legacy and what it meant to build something that mattered. My phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. Rebecca, saw the coverage of your ribbon cutting. Looks great. Proud of you, Marcus. Marcus, thanks. Couldn't have done any of this without you. Rebecca, sure you could have. I just helped you get free. You did the rest yourself. That night, I had dinner with Dave and his wife, Jessica, at a Thai place in our neighborhood. We talked about the next project, a development in the Bronx that would mix senior housing with childcare facilities, creating intergenerational connections in a community that needed both. You're building an empire, Dave observed, just a different kind than your dad's. Less of an empire, more of a neighborhood. Better than an empire, Jessica said. Empires fall, neighborhoods last. Walking home through Brooklyn streets alive with summer evening energy, kids playing basketball under streetlights, couples walking moms, bodega cats sunning themselves on stoops. I thought about the man I'd been 2 years ago. The man who'd stood in a ballroom in a tuxedo, watching his wife dance with his brother, feeling his world collapse. That man had been built on a foundation of lies. When the lies fell away, he'd fallen too. But from the ruins, something else had emerged. Not a phoenix, that metaphor was too grand. Just a person, flawed and uncertain but honest. Someone who'd learned the difference between looking successful and being successful, between playing a part and living authentically. My phone rang. Unknown number again. I almost didn't answer, then thought, what the hell? Hello? Marcus Chen? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Speaking. This is Jennifer Reeves from The Times. I'm writing a profile on young real estate developers who are changing how we think about urban housing. Your name came up repeatedly in my research. Would you be willing to speak with me? What kind of profile? The good kind. The kind that talks about people who are doing things differently, making choices that prioritize community over pure profit. I understand you walked away from your family's company to start your own. That's a hell of a story. It is, I agreed. But I'm not sure I want to tell it publicly. I understand, but think about it. Your work is impressive, and people should know about it. They should know there are alternatives to the cutthroat development model. You're proof of that. I took her number and promised to think about it. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, the same couch Daniel had slept with Olivia on, though I'd long since stopped caring about that, and thought about storytelling and truth-telling and the difference between the two. Maybe it was time to tell my story. Not for revenge or vindication, but because it might help someone else who was trapped in a life built on lies. Someone who needed permission to walk away, to burn it down, to start over. Someone who needed to know that you could survive losing everything and find out that everything wasn't actually what mattered. I texted Jennifer Reeves back. Let's talk, but I want editorial approval. This is my story to tell. Her response, deal. When can we meet? The profile ran 3 months later under the headline, Building Differently, How Marcus Chen Left His Family's Empire to Create Something Better. It was fair and thorough. Jennifer had interviewed me for hours, had visited my properties, had talked to residents and community leaders, and even Dave. She'd contacted my father's office for comment. They declined, and had somehow gotten quotes from several former Chen Development employees who spoke anonymously about the company's aggressive tactics and profit-at-all-costs mentality. The article mentioned the wedding disaster, but only briefly, framing it as a catalyst rather than the main story. The main story was about choosing principles over profit, community over capital, honesty over empire. It went viral, at least within real estate and urban planning circles. My phone rang constantly for weeks. Interview requests, collaboration proposals, people wanting to invest in Chen properties, people wanting to work with us. And one call from my father. Marcus? His voice was strained. We need to talk about that article. Why, it was true? It made our family look bad. It made me look bad. Dad, you made yourself look bad. I just stopped covering for you. A long silence, then, you're right, and that's what your therapist would say, isn't it? Take responsibility for my own actions? You're still in therapy? 3 years now, twice a week, learning to understand why I prioritize business over everything else. Why I sacrifice my relationship with my sons for deals and partnerships. And what have you learned? That I don't know how to be a father outside of being a businessman. That I measured love in utility and connection in transactions. That I tried to turn my sons into extensions of my ambitions instead of supporting them in becoming themselves. The self-awareness was startling. I didn't know what to say. Marcus, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm trying to change. And I'm proud of you. Not for being successful, though you are, but for having the courage to walk away from me. Thanks, Dad. Will I see you at Christmas? I thought about the birthday dinner, about awkward politeness and tentative connections. Probably, but I'm bringing Dave and Jessica. I need allies. Fair enough, we'll set 2 extra places. After we hung up, I sat with the strangeness of the conversation. My father was changing, slowly, painfully, probably incompletely, but changing. Whether that change was enough to rebuild something between us remained to be seen. But it was something, a start. On the 3rd anniversary of my wedding disaster, I marked the date in my calendar now, not from trauma, but from transformation. I threw a party, not a wedding anniversary party, a divorce anniversary party, a celebration of freedom and rebuilding and survival. Dave and Jessica came, of course. Rebecca came with her wife. Patricia Keene came, now working as my company's CFO and thriving. Sandra Williams came, bringing cookies from her new apartment. A dozen other people, friends, colleagues, tenants, community partners, filled my apartment with warmth and noise and genuine connection. A toast, Dave said, raising his glass, to Marcus Chen, who walked away from everything and built something better. To Marcus, everyone echoed, and I felt a fullness in my chest that had nothing to do with achievement or victory, and everything to do with being surrounded by people who knew me, really knew me, and liked what they found. Later, standing on my balcony with Rebecca while the party continued inside, I asked the question that had been nagging at me. Do you think I'm still angry about everything that happened? Rebecca considered this carefully. I think you are angry, justifiably, but I don't think you are anymore. I think you've moved past anger into something else. What? Gratitude, maybe. Not for the betrayal, fuck that, but for the clarity it gave you. For the freedom to build the life you actually wanted instead of the life everyone expected of you. That's a generous interpretation. It's the interpretation of someone who watched you transform. Marcus, 3 years ago, you were a people pleaser, trapped in a life that didn't fit. Now you're someone who knows exactly who he is and what he values. That's not just surviving, that's thriving. I thought about the man I'd been, standing in that ballroom. I thought about the man I was now, standing on this balcony in an apartment I'd chosen, surrounded by people I'd chosen, living a life I'd built from scratch. You're right, I said. I'm grateful. Which is insane, but I'm grateful. That's not insane, that's wisdom. Inside, someone had put on music. Not Can't Help Falling in Love, thank God, but something upbeat and modern. People were dancing, laughing, living. I joined them, and for the first time in years, dancing felt like joy instead of performance. 5 years after the wedding disaster, I got an invitation to Daniel's wedding. He was marrying Sarah, the woman he'd been dating at Dad's birthday dinner. The invitation was simple, elegant, with a handwritten note tucked inside. Marcus, I know this is complicated. I understand if you don't want to come, but you're my brother, and it wouldn't feel right not to invite you. No hard feelings if you decline. Daniel, and I showed it to Dave over coffee. Are you going? He asked. I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's too weird. What does your gut say? My gut said I was curious. Curious about who Daniel had become. Curious about whether he had actually changed or just convinced himself he had. Curious about whether I could sit through his wedding without thinking about my own. I think I'll go, I said finally, but I'm bringing a date. You're dating someone? Dave's eyes lit up. Since when? Since 3 months ago. Her name is Kenji. She's an architect. We met on the Bronx project. And you didn't tell me? I wanted to make sure it was real first. I'm done performing relationships. The wedding was small, intimate, at a garden venue in Connecticut. When I arrived with Kenji, a brilliant woman with sharp wit and zero interest in real estate drama, Daniel looked genuinely shocked to see me. Marcus, you came. Congratulations, I said, shaking his hand. This is Kenji. Nice to meet you, Kenji said warmly. Marcus has told me a lot about you. I'm sure none of it is good, Daniel said with a self-deprecating smile. Actually, some of it is. He says you're doing better, that you're in therapy, working on yourself. I am, every week. It's helped a lot. The wedding was lovely. Sarah was radiant. Daniel was visibly nervous and genuinely happy. My parents were there, looking older but also somehow lighter, as if years of therapy had lifted some invisible weight. During the reception, my father approached me and Kenji. Marcus, and you must be Kenji. I've heard about your work on the Bronx project. Impressive design. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Please call me Alexander. He turned to me. Can we talk, just for a minute? I excused myself and followed my father to a quiet corner of the garden. I wanted to thank you for coming, he said. It means a lot to Daniel, to all of us. I came for Daniel. He's my brother. I can't forget what happened. But I also can't spend my whole life punishing him for it. That's generous. It's healthy. There's a difference. My father nodded slowly. I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately, about what I'll leave behind when I'm gone. The company? The company is just buildings and contracts. I'm thinking about relationships, about whether my sons will remember me as someone who loved them or someone who used them. What do you want them to remember? That I tried to change, that I recognized my mistakes and worked to be better, even if I couldn't undo the harm I'd caused. That's a good legacy, I said, if you actually do it. I am doing it. Your mother can confirm, Daniel can confirm. I'm not the man I was 5 years ago. Good, because that man did a lot of damage. I know. His voice was heavy. Marcus, I know I can never make up for what I put you through, but I want you to know I understand now what I did wrong. And if I could go back and make different choices, I would. But you can't. None of us can. We just have to live with what we did and try to do better. Yes. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. You've done better. You've built something remarkable, something that helps people instead of just extracting value from them. I'm proud of you. Thanks, Dad. We stood there for a moment, two men who had hurt each other and been hurt by each other, who'd chosen destruction and reconstruction, who were now navigating the complicated middle ground between estrangement and reconciliation. I should get back to Kenji, I said finally. Of course. Bring her to Sunday dinner sometime. Your mother would love to meet her properly. Maybe, I said. We'll see. But walking back to where Kenji waited, I thought maybe wasn't really maybe. Maybe was probably yes, eventually, when I was ready. Because the thing about healing wasn't that you forgot what happened or forgave everything. It was that you learned to hold pain and joy simultaneously. To acknowledge that people were complicated, that families were messy, that life was full of betrayals and reconciliations and everything in between. Everything okay? Kenji asked when I returned. Yeah, I said, taking her hand. Everything's okay. And surprisingly, it was. 10 years after the wedding disaster, I attended a real estate industry awards ceremony. Chen Properties had been nominated for a Community Impact Award for our work in affordable housing development. I didn't expect to win. We were up against much larger firms with more resources, but it was nice to be recognized. When they announced us as winners, I was genuinely shocked. I walked to the stage with Dave, and we accepted the award together. a heavy glass plaque with our company name and our project list engraved on it. Thank you, I said into the microphone, looking out at a ballroom full of developers and investors and urban planners. This award belongs to the communities we serve, who trusted us to build something that worked for them instead of just for our bottom line. Real estate development should be about creating homes and neighborhoods, not just maximizing profit. We're honored to be part of that conversation. The applause was generous. As I walked off stage, I passed the table where my father sat with other Chen development executives. He stood and shook my hand, and there was genuine pride in his expression. Well done, Marcus. Your mother would have loved to see this. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier, peacefully in her sleep after a long battle with cancer. I'd been with her at the end, holding her hand while she drifted away. She knew, I said. I showed her our projects. She was proud. She was always proud of you, even when I wasn't smart enough to see what you were building. It was as close to a perfect reconciliation as we were likely to get. Acknowledgement without erasure, pride without forgetting the pain. Later at the after party, a young man approached me nervously. Mr. Chen, I'm James Taylor. I'm a junior developer, and I wanted to tell you that your work inspired me to start my own firm focused on sustainable community-based development. I read that profile about you years ago, and it changed how I thought about real estate. That's great, I said, genuinely pleased. What are you working on? He told me about a project in Detroit, renovating abandoned houses for first-time home buyers. It was ambitious and idealistic and probably going to be hard as hell. Sounds like something we did when we were starting out, I said. Here's my card. Call me sometime. Maybe we can collaborate. His face lit up. Really? That would be incredible. After he left, Kenji, now my wife of 4 years, squeezed my hand. You're mentoring now, passing it on. Trying to. Someone should benefit from all the mistakes I made. You mean all the lessons you learned? Same thing, different framing? She laughed. That's very you. Optimistic pragmatism. We left the awards ceremony and walked through the city streets, the same streets I'd walked 10 years ago in a wedding tuxedo, alone and devastated and certain my life was over. That man seemed like a stranger now, someone I'd been briefly in a different life, before I'd learned what mattered and what didn't. The city was the same, loud and vibrant and full of possibility, but I was different, changed by betrayal and healing, by destruction and reconstruction, by learning to build something real instead of something impressive. Do you ever think about that day? Kenji asked. The wedding? Sometimes, not as much as I used to. It's like a scar now, visible, but it doesn't hurt anymore. Do you regret how you handled it? I thought about that, about the confrontation in the ballroom, about the divorce and the settlement, about walking away from everything. No, I said finally. I did what I needed to do, and it brought me here. Here was a brownstone in Brooklyn that we'd renovated ourselves. Here was a company that employed 30 people and had developed housing for hundreds of families. Here was a marriage built on honesty and mutual respect instead of performance and expectation. Here was a life I'd built from scratch, on my own terms, with my own values. Here was pretty good. We walked home through the October evening, leaves falling around us like confetti, the city alive with possibility, and I felt something I hadn't felt in that ballroom 10 years ago. Peace, not the peace of having everything figured out or all wounds healed, the peace of knowing I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do, with exactly the right person by my side. The peace of a life built on truth instead of lies. The peace of surviving destruction and choosing to rebuild as someone better, stronger, more honest than before. The peace of being, finally and genuinely, myself. On the 20th anniversary of the wedding disaster, a date that had long since lost its sting, becoming just another marker in a rich and complicated life, I received a letter. It came via certified mail, which was unusual enough that I opened it immediately. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Marcus, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. The cancer has progressed beyond treatment, and I've chosen hospice care over prolonging the inevitable. I'm writing to apologize, not the performative apology I gave you at my birthday party, but a real one. I destroyed your wedding day and your relationship with your brother because I prioritized business over your happiness. I facilitated Daniel and Olivia's affair because I thought I could control the narrative and the outcome. I treated you like an asset instead of a son. Those choices were unforgivable. I know that now. My therapist helped me understand it. Your mother told me before she died, and I've lived with the knowledge of what I did to you for 20 years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just telling you that I know what I did, and I'm sorry for it, and I've spent 2 decades trying to be better than the man who hurt you. You've built something remarkable with your life and your company. You've shown that success doesn't require sacrificing integrity. You've proven that you can be better than I was. I'm proud of you. I always have been, even when I was too blind and selfish to show it. Your father, Alexander Chen. I read the letter 3 times, then called Daniel. Did you get a letter? I asked. Yeah, just now. You? Yeah. A long silence. Then Daniel said, he's really dying. I know. Are you going to see him? I thought about my father, about the empire he'd built and the prices he'd paid, and about the man he'd been and the man he'd tried to become, about the 20 years of therapy and effort in small, incremental changes. Yeah, I said, I'm going to see him. Can I come with you? Sure, we'll go together. That afternoon, Daniel and I drove to the hospice facility in Westchester, where our father was spending his final days. We didn't talk much during the drive, just existed in complicated brotherhood. No longer as close as we'd once been, but no longer enemies either. Just 2 men shaped by the same family, carrying different scars, navigating the same difficult inheritance. Our father was in a sunny room overlooking a garden. He was thin, barely recognizable, his body ravaged by disease. But his eyes were clear and alert when we entered. Marcus, Daniel. His voice was barely a whisper. You came. Of course we came, I said, sitting in the chair beside his bed. You're our father. Not a very good one. No, I agreed, but a trying one. That counts for something. He smiled slightly at that. Daniel sat on the other side of the bed, and for a while we just sat there, the 3 Chen men, surrounded by the machinery of dying and the weight of shared history. I wanted to tell you both something, our father said finally. The company, Chen Development, I'm leaving it to Daniel, but I'm also leaving half my personal assets to fund the Chen Community Foundation, which will support affordable housing projects and community development. Marcus, I want you to run it. I stared at him. Dad, let me finish. The foundation will operate independently. You'll have full control over where the money goes and how it's used. It's my attempt to make my legacy about more than just profit, to support the work you're already doing. Why, I asked? Because you showed me there was another way. Because your mother, before she died, told me that if I wanted to be remembered as more than just a ruthless businessman, I needed to support the kind of development that actually helps people, because it's the right thing to do. He coughed, a rattling sound that made both Daniel and me wince. I know money doesn't fix what I broke, he continued, but maybe it can help you build something better. I looked at Daniel, who nodded slightly, then back at our father. Okay, I said, I'll do it, but on one condition. What? The foundation supports projects regardless of who develops them. Not just Chen Properties, not just developers connected to our family. Anyone doing good work in communities that need it. Deal. He smiled, and for a moment I saw the father I'd known as a child, before business and ambition had hardened him into someone else. You always were the idealist, Marcus. I'm glad you never lost that. He died 3 days later, peacefully, with both his sons present. The funeral was well attended. Business associates, former employees, people whose lives he'd touched in ways both positive and complicated. I gave a eulogy that was honest without being cruel, acknowledging both his accomplishments and his failures, painting a picture of a complicated man who'd spent his final years trying to atone for earlier sins. My father was not a perfect man, I said to the gathered crowd. He made choices that hurt people he loved. He prioritized success over relationships. But in his final years, he worked to change. He went to therapy. He tried to understand his mistakes. He created a foundation to support the kind of work he should have been doing all along. I paused. looking out at faces both familiar and strange. That's not redemption. Redemption isn't something you can earn through last-minute gestures, but it is transformation. And transformation, however late, however incomplete, still matters. After the funeral, Daniel and I stood together at the reception, watching people mill about with plates of catered food and glasses of wine. "Do you think he changed?" Daniel asked. "Really changed or just performed change?" "I think he changed," I said. "Not completely, not perfectly, but enough that it was real." "Is that enough?" "For what?" "For forgiveness, for moving past everything." I thought about the man my father had been and the man he'd become, about the wedding disaster and the years of rebuilding, about the foundation he'd created and the letter he'd written. "It's enough for peace," I said. "That's all any of us can hope for. Not perfection, just peace." 20 years after the wedding disaster, I stood in front of an auditorium full of urban planning students at Columbia, giving a guest lecture on community-focused development. "Real estate development is about power," I told them. "The power to shape communities, to determine who gets to live where, to decide what kind of city we want to build. For too long, that power has been wielded by people who only saw profit, who only asked, how much can we extract, instead of how much value can we create?" I clicked to the next slide, showing before and after photos of our Brooklyn project. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can build profitably while also building responsibly. You can create value for investors while also creating value for communities. It requires different metrics, different priorities, and a willingness to think long-term instead of just chasing quick returns. A hand went up, a young woman in the front row. "Mr. Chen, I read about how you started your company, about walking away from your family's business. Was it worth it? The sacrifice?" "It wasn't a sacrifice," I said. "It was a trade. I traded a life built on compromises and lies for a life built on principles and honesty. I traded fitting into someone else's vision for building my own. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I lost things. But what I gained was worth infinitely more than what I lost." "What did you gain?" "Myself," I said simply. "I gained myself." After the lecture, several students approached with questions. One of them, a young man with intense eyes and an earnest manner, asked if Chen Properties was hiring. "Always," I said. "Send your resume to our HR director. We're especially interested in people who understand that development is about more than just buildings. It's about people and communities and the kind of world we want to create." Driving home that evening, I thought about the man I'd been 20 years ago. The man who'd believed success meant following the path laid out for him. The man who'd prioritize family expectations and business opportunities over his own instincts and values. That man had died in a ballroom on his wedding day, and from his death, someone else had been born. Someone harder, but also kinder. Someone more careful, but also braver. Someone who knew that the only approval that mattered was his own. At home, Kenji was in her studio working on architectural renderings for our next project. Our daughter, 15 now, smart and passionate about environmental justice, was doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was the lecture?" Kenji asked when I came in. "Good, inspiring actually. These kids are so idealistic and passionate. They want to change the world." "You did change the world. Your little corner of it anyway." "Maybe. I tried at least." Our daughter looked up from her math homework. "Dad, did you really walk out of your own wedding?" I'd told her the story a few years ago when she was old enough to understand complexity and nuance. She'd been fascinated and horrified in equal measure. "I walked out of my wedding reception," I corrected, "after I'd already gotten married, which made the whole thing more complicated." "But you don't regret it?" "No, I regret trusting people who didn't deserve trust. I regret being so focused on making everyone else happy that I ignored obvious red flags. But walking away, that I don't regret at all." "Good," she said firmly. "You deserve better than people who lie to you." "Everyone deserves that," I said. "The trick is recognizing when it's happening and having the courage to walk away." That night, lying in bed with Kenji beside me, I thought about weddings and disasters and the strange paths lives take. If someone had told me 20 years ago, standing in that ballroom in my tuxedo, that I'd end up here running a successful company, married to an amazing woman, raising a daughter, managing a foundation worth millions. I wouldn't have believed them. But more than the external markers of success, I wouldn't have believed I'd find peace. That the betrayal that had felt world-ending could become just another chapter in a much longer story. That I'd learned to hold pain and joy simultaneously, to acknowledge harm while still moving forward, to forgive some things and refuse to forgive others while still living fully. What are you thinking about? Kenji murmured, half asleep. How lucky I am, I said. How strange it is that the worst day of my life led to all of this. Not strange, she said. Just life. Messy and complicated and sometimes beautiful because of the mess, not despite it. She was right. Life was messy. Mine had been spectacularly messy. But from that mess, I'd built something real, something honest, something mine. And that finally was enough. The documentary filmmaker was young, enthusiastic, and had done her research. She'd read the Times profile, interviewed people from the old neighborhood projects, reviewed financial records. Now she sat across from me in my office, the same Brooklyn brownstone that housed both Chen Properties and the Chen Community Foundation, with her camera rolling and her questions ready. Tell me about that day, she said. The wedding. What do you remember most? I'd told this story 100 times over the years, to journalists and students and curious friends, but it never quite got easier, never quite lost its sharp edges. I remember thinking it was a misunderstanding, I said. When she walked past me to dance with my brother, my first thought was that I'd misheard, that there must be some explanation. The human mind is remarkable at protecting itself from painful truths. When did you realize it wasn't a misunderstanding? When they started dancing. When I saw how they moved together. You can't fake that kind of intimacy. It was obvious they'd been together for a long time. What did you feel? Everything and nothing. Betrayal, obviously. Humiliation. Rage. But also this strange clarity, like suddenly being able to see a picture that had been out of focus for years. Everything made sense in the worst possible way. And confronting your father about the fake project, was that planned? No, it was pure instinct, pattern recognition. 6 months of my brother supposedly working on a project I'd never been briefed on, combined with everything else clicking into place. I didn't know if I was right until I saw his face. The filmmaker nodded, making notes. Fast forward 20 years. Was it worth it? Everything you gave up, everything you went through. I looked around my office, at the photos on the walls, projects we'd completed, families we'd housed, communities we'd helped build, at the awards and recognitions, at the pictures of Kenji and our daughter, at the man I'd become. Worth it doesn't quite capture it, I said. It's not like I chose to be betrayed. I didn't volunteer for that pain. But once it happened, once everything fell apart, I had a choice about what to do next. I could have stayed broken. I could have let bitterness consume me. Or I could build something new. And you built something new. We built something new, I corrected. Me, Dave, Kenji, everyone who believed in what we were trying to do. Community-focused development isn't a solo project. It's collaboration all the way down. What about your brother? Your father? Where did those relationships end up? My father died years ago. We'd reached a kind of peace before the end. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. He tried to change, and that effort mattered even if it couldn't undo the harm he'd caused. And your brother? Daniel and I talk occasionally. Birthdays, holidays, major life events. We're not close like we were, but we're not enemies either. He's built a good life. He runs Chen Development now, and from what I hear, he's trying to do it more ethically than our father did. Whether he's succeeding, I don't know. It's not my responsibility anymore. What about Olivia? I smiled slightly. Olivia is a stranger. I heard she remarried someone from her father's company. I hope she's happy. I genuinely do. Not because I'm some enlightened saint, but because her happiness or unhappiness has nothing to do with me anymore. She's someone I used to know, like an old college acquaintance. Her life and mine diverged 20 years ago, and they've stayed diverged. The filmmaker asked a few more questions about the foundation, about our latest projects, about advice I'd give to young developers. Standard interview questions that I answered with practiced ease. Then, as she was packing up her equipment, she asked one final question. If you could go back and tell your younger self something, the man standing in that ballroom 20 years ago, what would it be? I thought about that man, about his pain and confusion and desperation, about how he'd felt like his life was ending when really it was just beginning. I'd tell him that the floor isn't as far down as he thinks, that he's stronger than he knows, that losing everything can be the beginning of finding what actually matters. And I'd tell him to trust the process, even when the process feels like destruction. Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something real. After the filmmaker left, I sat at my desk watching the afternoon sun slant through the windows, thinking about weddings and disasters and the strange alchemy that turns devastation into wisdom. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Daniel, saw the documentary crew at your office telling the wedding story again? Marcus, yeah, gets easier each time. Daniel, does it ever stop hurting? For you, I mean. I know it hurts me to think about what I did. I thought about how to answer that, about the difference between pain and regret, between memory and trauma. Marcus, it stopped hurting years ago. Now it's just a story, an important one, but a story. You should probably stop hurting too. You've done the work. You've changed. Holding on to guilt forever doesn't help anyone. Daniel, thanks. That means a lot coming from you. Marcus, take care of yourself, little brother. Daniel, you too. I put down the phone and looked out at Brooklyn spreading before me. This borough I'd helped shape in small ways. This community I'd invested in. This corner of the world I'd tried to make better. The documentary would air in a few months, would tell my story to people who'd never heard it, would frame my wedding disaster as a catalyst for transformation, which was true as far as it went. But the deeper truth, the truth I was still learning even 20 years later, was that transformation wasn't an event. It was a practice, a daily choice to be honest instead of comfortable, to build instead of perform, to show up authentically even when authenticity was hard. That wedding disaster had given me permission to transform. But the transformation itself was the work of years, of countless small choices, of learning to live differently. And the best part? The transformation wasn't finished. Maybe it never would be. Maybe that was the point. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street where people moved through their lives, working, loving, struggling, celebrating. Each one carrying their own stories of disaster and recovery, betrayal and rebuilding, loss and discovery. I was just one story among millions, one person trying to make meaning from chaos, one life built on the ruins of another. But it was my story, my life, my choice about what to build from the wreckage. And standing there, 20 years after the worst day of my life, I realized something profound. I'd do it all again. Not the betrayal, fuck that, forever. But the walking away, the burning down, the rebuilding from scratch. I'd do that again in a heartbeat, because it had brought me here, to this moment, to this life, to this version of myself that I actually liked and respected. And that finally was the greatest gift that disaster could give, the freedom to become yourself.